Well, no matter what happened on SmackDown tonight, we are, of course, leading with the news of the death of Hulk Hogan at age 71. The biggest drawing card in, modern era pro wrestling. There's certainly different standards for what constitutes top draw because the metrics change with every era. But Hulk Hogan, a massive, massive influence on the direction of this industry. WWE opened the show with a big screen in the Cleveland Arena, acknowledging his death, and then everyone gathered on the stage with Paul Levesque front and center. Some real-life, longtime friends of Hulk Hogan brought in Sergeant Slaughter, B. Brian Blair, Jimmy Hart, Hacksaw Duggan, all known to be friends. Jimmy Hart, never saw Hogan without Jimmy Hart in recent decades. I've interviewed both Hogan and Jimmy, actually, and Hacksaw and Ted DiBiase. Who else did I mention? Anyway, and I mean, they're all friends with Hogan. Jimmy was as loyal of a friend, it seems, as you could get. So it's great that WWE was able to assemble them for this occasion. And it was emotional. Jimmy Hart, they did a close-up of, and understandably, he was crying. The whole roster was assembled. And then WWE, or Paul Levesque, gave a speech about Hogan. And it was interesting. The only news coming out of the speech is that their speeches were clearly filtered through the notion that a lot of people have mixed feelings about Hogan because of the racist, and frankly, it gets underplayed, but the anti-gay comments, he used the anti-gay F word also on those tapes, and then his poor handling of it afterwards, which is as much of a story as what he said privately when he didn't think anyone would know, which is more revealing than when you say something for public consumption in terms of what's in someone's heart. Possibly, likely, and this was multiple occasions, but it's how we handled it afterwards that I think really cemented how a lot of people felt about him, including in the locker room when he had that just ill-fated locker room speech where people were expecting him to apologize, especially to the black wrestlers, and instead he talked about how we all have to stick together and make sure there's not a camera or microphone on you. You might get caught doing something that we all do, but none of us want anyone to know about. In so many words, that's what he said, and that's certainly how it was interpreted. And it hurt his reputation, and deservedly so. However, and I think Cody handled it well in his promo. However you feel about Hogan, facts are facts. He was a massive draw. He brought a lot of joy to a lot of people's lives. There are very few public figures at the level of Hogan who don't have something controversial. If you read autobiographies of stars, there's a chapter there. Oh, yeah, there was this chapter of my life, and I'm going to confess as much as I'm willing to about what I learned and my regrets. I mean, that is a big part of a lot of public figures' lives. And so Hogan is not alone in having this controversy, but it doesn't mean that he did enough for a lot of people to feel that they could forgive him afterwards. And so that weighs, and he had 10 years to do it. On PWTorch.com today, I published my cover story from the Pro Wrestling Torch newsletter 10 years ago this week. The headline was the end of Hulkamania. And I really thought that everything that came out 10 years ago, it happened to be 10 years ago this month, was going to end it. And in certain ways it did. And the last time we saw Hulk Hogan in public on national television was getting booed in the Raw Netflix premiere. I was happy that his friends didn't have to stand there while the crowd booed him again. I think booing Hogan at the Netflix Raw to send him a message that said, and different people had different reasons. Some are like, you're old and we don't want you around. We want Tomorrow Stars. Of course, there can be a variety of reasons for it. But the message sent was, hold on. I'm back. Dog's freaking out. Interrupted my prepared speech here. I think it was fans had their different reasons for booing him. But the notion that, or not the notion, but the context changed tonight. And it wasn't about sending Hulk Hogan a message anymore. It was a message about trying to let Hogan know, send a message to Hogan fans that there is still appreciation for everything he accomplished as an entertainer. Because if he's not there to get a message about being booed, I don't think it does any good for his family and his friends and his colleagues to hear fans booing. So I thought Cleveland handled it well. I want to throw to Eric for some of his thoughts.
Yeah, touching on what you just ended with there I was kind of waiting for people to maybe boo when they were doing the 10 bell salute and something. And I was encouraged that the fans in attendance had enough respect not to do that, just for a human life in general. It's not the right time for it. Say what you want about the man. And I know many of us that are fans of this industry who know a lot more, we've had to recalibrate our feelings on the man over time. And for someone like me that grew up, I wouldn't say idolizing Hulk Hogan, but it was more so the inspiration that he showed and that how he inspired children to do things. And you can't take that away, what he did, the effect that he had. You can separate the two things in my eyes.
Yeah, art and artist. I mean, you can have a great time at a concert, and whether it's a concert you go to when you're 9, it's your first concert ever, when you're 19 and you're in a club for the first time, or whatever. The message, the experience is there, even if you learn something about the rock stars later that you don't like.
Yeah, if I watch a movie and I could still separate the art from the artist. If I like the performance and I like the character, I don't have to like the person.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting for me spending, the last 24 hours seeing a lot of people that I grew up with who have fallen out of wrestling and watching wrestling, seeing their reactions like, oh, this is my childhood just died and all these things. And they don't know the background, or even if they did, maybe they wouldn't care. It's been interesting to see how people have reacted to this. I've appreciated the people that don't react with just pure hatred, because I just don't think it's the time for it. People that are celebrating that the man has passed. Yeah, that just feels wrong.
Nobody wanted Hogan to die. Well, I should say nobody. We should. Right. No matter what Hogan did was the words he used are vile, and to not speak out against it is an allowance for more bigotry towards black people. And again, that the anti-gay F slur isn't being brought up in any of the media stories I've read, but that was there too. And there's a history of violence and discrimination against groups. And it is shameful that somebody as privileged and rich and famous, with all the resources Hogan has to be educated and kind, behind closed doors when he didn't think it was being recorded, use those words. And it wasn't just the words. It's very different than Vince McMahon in character doing something that was bad taste and stupid, but Hogan equating it to that and trying to justify it, or President Obama using it and trying to equate it, showed such a lack of just savvy to a savviness that should come along with somebody with his exposure to the world as someone in his 50s when these comments were made, and somebody in his 60s when the comments surfaced. It showed an incredible lack of character. And there are people who tell me they love Hulk Hogan to this day who are so deeply disappointed in the last 10 years in him. And but everybody can have their own emotions, but this idea that because he was rich and successful and charismatic and entertaining, that that he gets a free pass. No, he doesn't. He should. In fact, he gets less of a pass than somebody without the privilege and the responsibility that comes with the fame and the riches that he achieved through his success, and the hypocrisy, the incredible contradiction to his message, which is what I wrote in that story. And I encourage people to check it out on PWTorch.com. I laid out his theme song, what he said in his promo, what his character was built on. This was not like Ric Flair said some bad things and he's been called out for it, but his character wasn't telling kids, buy my lunchbox and I'm your role model. And that's where a lot of people felt crushed, because people, right or wrong, naively or optimistically bought into that the person behind the Hulk Hogan character had something in common with the character. And it was in such stark contrast to it. That's what crushed people. That's what hurt people. But that doesn't mean the day after he died that you try to send a message by booing him, which thankfully I don't have to talk about, because I didn't think anybody did that in that building, or if they did, they were shouted down with cheers. That said, the crowd didn't give him a 10-minute Hogan chant either. I mean, I think there are complicated feelings about Hogan, understandably so, and I thought Cleveland was classy about it. I think the tone was right and the words were right, Eric.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I'm glad that, just thank you to the fans for Cleveland for, behaving that civilly about this. And I always look at this from the lens of, I know who I am. I know what I look like. I know that, certain comments don't hit me the exact same way they would hit someone else. But that doesn't make it any better. I can see, I can understand, I know right and wrong, I see this, and it makes it's what you said before. It's how he reacted to it too. I think most people would understand if he grew up a certain way even, and he learned along the way that what was right and was wrong. But it seemed like he never learned anything. It seemed like he never wanted to take accountability for anything that he did. But, mostly I appreciated that WWE chose to handle this they didn't try to dance around it. They just said it's a complicated human being. They didn't pretend that none of that ever happened.
Yep. I mean, they didn't draw attention to it, nor was it their job to do so. That's independent media like us, chronicling things without a reason to filter, documenting facts and then giving our honest, hopefully fair-minded opinions on it, but not, we're not going to give leeway to somebody just because they're rich and famous and charismatic. I mean, you should be held accountable for your actions even more so if you are rich and famous. The idea, that Hogan talked about, well, that's how people spoke, back in his hometown and his circle. Like, okay, like that is a fact that you should have outgrown by the time you were 23 or 28 or 31, but he was in his 50s and he had kids. And one of those conversations was with his kid. And there's, it's not just that with Hogan, he was a controversial figure. I will say, as far as the racism goes, Kevin Nash said, I spent a lot of time around Hulk Hogan. This is a statement 10 years ago he made, never said it, and was never racist. Never said any of those words around us. So, that can be interpreted in multiple ways. My interpretation of it was Hogan wasn't a raving, open racist all the time at work. He just happened to be, during a stretch, at least that stretch of time. What are the odds it was only twice, if those are the only two times microphones were on? But that wasn't his reputation. And there were people who saw him as a politician. The biggest spit take of any book I've ever read by a wrestler, the biggest just spit take was Hogan saying in the book that he wrote, that I was accused of being a politician, and I was so hurt by that because this is what it means, that I tried to manipulate things to my benefit at the expense of others. And that would be really bad if anyone did that, and I don't want that reputation. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but it's pretty close to that. And I was just like, seriously, like he admitted to me, like, and when I interviewed him, and I talked to him for a while off the phone. We had a phone friendship for a while. And, he admitted that, his job wasn't to tell the truth to the media or on television. It was to promote the Hulk Hogan brand. And there was a lot of non-truths promoting the Hulk Hogan brand in his book. That's not a crime. It's up to us to call him out on it. And that's why there's value in independent journalism compared to in-house propaganda. But going full circle back, Hogan's reputation was a politician, did what he did to be successful. He's like, I had more power than others, but others were trying to do the same thing. I just happened to have more leverage and more success, and I worked hard, and I made the right moves. Great. Ultimately, he was not known by anybody to be someone who's using that language liberally or at all otherwise. And so I want to put that in context. It's not to excuse what we know, but it is to mitigate it, that this wasn't somebody who everybody hates because it turned out he was doing this all the time backstage. Like that wasn't his reputation. And I think that's part of the framework of what we know about him now. But yes, it is a tough night. I mean, when you're younger than a celebrity and you follow them, you kind of hope to outlive him. I mean, it's just from a chronological standpoint, his body went through a lot in this business. He didn't work the schedule of a lot of wrestlers. He's had years off. He's filmed movies. He had a stretch of years in WWF where he worked hard, and then a stretch of years in WCW where it was mostly once a week, appearing, not wrestling a lot. And he wasn't a full-time wrestler for decades like a lot of people. He was a full-time person in wrestling, a prominent name who had stretches of prominence being on top. But with his frame and his athleticism, his body was beat up. And he was, had hip issues. He was going through surgeries. It's been a rough few years for him. And he took a lot of steroids. And that is not a controversial statement to say, because Hulk Hogan in his book said, I started taking a lot of steroids starting in 1975. We didn't know it was bad, and it wasn't illegal. And so he started admitting it. And he told me the biggest mistake he ever made during the steroid scandal was lying on Arsenio Hall and saying he only took it a couple times for rehabilitative purposes. And he admitted after the fact, huge blunder. So I just want to be on. It is not controversial to say Hulk Hogan took a load of steroids to get as big as he did. And steroids are known to be damaging to hearts, especially ones with pre-existing conditions or there's genetic issues. His dad lived into his late 80s, by the way, so Hogan had genetics on his side in that respect. I assume it's his biological father, and maybe Hogan in a different lifestyle would have lived longer, but his body went through a lot, and so he paid a price. Some of it was perhaps related to steroids and the cosmetics, the reality of the cosmetics of his gimmick. Other was just the wear and tear of gym, weightlifting, travel, and bumps in the ring. So he physically gave a lot of his body to this business, and that obviously, very likely, accelerated the timeline of him going through what he went through that led to his death yesterday morning. So that's, I think, an important context too. And I thought WWE I think they probably thought this through a lot, how to handle it. They didn't want to take a ton of heat for trying to whitewash what Hogan said or treat him like a hero in real life. I thought it was measured and appropriate, Eric. What else would you like to add?
Yeah, I mean, not much to add. I won't be able to say it better than you did, but I felt like they celebrated the things that should be celebrated, and they didn't celebrate other things that shouldn't. And I thought that's where they excelled. I know I was trying to think about after that tribute video what I was going to write in my report. And I know that I would never feel comfortable judging another person on the way they live their life. But so that's why I just choose what I will celebrate is, I think you muted.
I'm sorry. I would judge somebody if I learned that they were kicking and killing puppies in their backyard every day. So and I say that as like an extreme example, but like I want to push back. I think it's okay to judge people for the way they live their life, Eric. I think we ought to. I think shame people for doing shameful things. That's part of society surviving and everybody looking out for each other. If somebody's calling up ICE agents right now saying, hey, there's a legal Hispanic, but I know they don't carry their papers with them, throw them in a car and take them to some camp and then send them to a third country when they served in the military years ago defending the United States, I would shame that person for doing that. So I say that as exaggerated examples. Like, I think we have to be nuanced in our notion that we don't judge Hogan. What Hogan did should be judged, but it should be part of, and I think this is what you're getting at, Eric, it should be part of the overall balance. And there's no question there are people who are friends with Hogan who swear by him as a good friend, and he cared for his kids. I know a lot of people who didn't spend any time with their kids, and he was on the phone with his son. And I shouldn't get into that because, there's issues there with his kids too that have played over time, but people are complicated. And I think it's okay when you're a public figure to be judged for shameful things.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And, like you said, people are complicated. He can still be a good friend, but also have done these reprehensible things and that he should be held accounted for. If anything, I'll be curious to see how over time, how his entire life and career is judged moving forward and how it affects other people moving forward. And hopefully it affects the choices they make, especially when they're in the public eye like he was.
Yeah. Comment from Brock Benningfield in the chat. He goes, it's crazy how much Hogan changed the wrestling business. It'll never happen again. Totally true. I want to point to the Hulk Hogan podcast series that I started doing yesterday. Yesterday, Rich Fan, PWTorch columnist, co-host on this show sometimes. He's part of a VIP exclusive podcast, Everything with Rich and Wade. And every 3 weeks, roughly, he's on the flagship with me as co-host. We did a special episode, 70-some minutes, talking about Hogan and the scandals of the last 10 years. And what led to him being booed in his last national appearance, and what led to WWE being very guarded in their praise of him as a human being tonight. It was a big part of the final chapter of his public life. Rich and I went into it, talked about why it mattered, things that are fair to criticize him for, things that should be kept in perspective and not get out of hand. That is a VIP exclusive show. And then today we drop part 1, and tomorrow will be part 2 of an over 100-minute podcast I did with AWA and in general pro wrestling historian George Shire, book author. He co-hosted with me my Pro Wrestling Focus radio show in the early 1990s on KFAN radio. By the way, those are available. Those episodes are available, years of them, with the VIP membership and among hundreds of retro radio shows from the 90s. So there's a lot of cool stuff in our archives if you go VIP. And we talked for 100 minutes about Hulk Hogan's 2 years, roughly, mid 81 to mid 83. in the AWA. And also, he spent time in Japan during that time period. And we talked about how important that time period was because it's when Hulkamania was born and refined. And he had wrestlers in the AWA that George named by name because he knows a lot of those wrestlers from that era personally, including Greg Gagne to this day, being a good friend of his, Vern Gagne's son, the main promoter and owner of the AWA. And we got George passed along a lot of insight that I didn't have, and I gave a lot of insight that I did have living through the birth of Hulkamania as a kid. And for context, I'm not someone looking back and trying to figure out what Hulkamania was. I wasn't someone who covered it as a journalist like I did Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock and John Cena. I was like a 9, 10, 11-year-old kid watching Hulkamania. I guess it was 10. And I was a Hulkamaniac. I mean, I was like one of the first Hulkamaniacs in the world because he showed up on AWA TV and the fans turned him babyface, and I just thought he was the coolest thing. And going to AWA shows and seeing him wrestle was amazing. And going to WWF shows thereafter and seeing him when I was still young was amazing. His charisma just was like unlike anything I'd seen. And I had seen charismatic wrestlers on TV for years. He was absolutely something special, and he changed the course of the industry. He pulled from Dusty Rhodes in the charismatic promos Dusty did as a babyface in Florida. That's where Hogan was from. He pulled from superstar Billy Graham, who we emulated in a lot of ways, a predecessor to him of the steroid era, which Billy Graham admitted to multiple times on radio interviews I did with him, podcast interviews, Torch Talk interviews, and other interviews. He was very open about that. Hogan emulated him. So Hogan, as every top star does, pulls from other wrestlers. But a lot of wrestlers pull from other wrestlers, Eric, and they don't end up being the biggest draws of their era. And and Vince McMahon, I think, probably would have been the dominant national leader without Hulk Hogan because of his ambition. And George Shire and I, by the way, talked about that in that 100-minute podcast. I encourage, seriously, if you're not a VIP member, there's so much. This business is so fascinating, and it's VIP membership that allows me to dedicate full time to this and put the type of content that I've put out for over 35 years. And this is one of those weeks where I'm really proud of what we're doing, putting it in historical context. We're doing separate shows on separate slices of Hogan's career. PWTorch.com/GoVIP. If you've been a former member, had to step away for a while, you're invited back. If you're new, please check it out. We'd love to have your membership. And this is one of those weeks where you get a lot in return for that. And talking about the influence of Hulk Hogan with somebody like George Shire, where I'm learning, and I thought, there wasn't a lot left to learn, given how much I immersed myself in real time in that and covered it since, is fascinating. And we got into, what if Hulk Hogan had not gone to WWE? Eric, what if or WWF, we'll just say it in that era, would Vince McMahon have succeeded? And we delved into that. And what if Vern Gagne why didn't Vern Gagne keep Hogan? We got into the realities of that and what circumstances might have led to Hogan staying in the AWA. Remember, AWA ended up on ESPN. They were the biggest territory geographically. They had major cities like Chicago, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Denver, San Francisco. They were in Canada. There was a possibility the AWA would have been the dominant brand. And George Shire and I got into why that didn't happen and what it would have taken for there to be a chance of that happening. So Hogan's influence by going to the WWF with Vince McMahon as a guy in his early 30s, super ambitious with the New York market behind him. Ambition and an ailing father who he bought the company from and had different ideas of how to make it big. I mean, so many things came together. Vince McMahon got a turnkey top act in Hulk Hogan. He was already fully formed, but Vince McMahon amplified it in ways Hogan wouldn't have found with another promoter, I don't think. Wade Barrett said tonight, we wouldn't be here today without Hogan. I strongly disagree with that. Pro wrestling would be around. I was a fan before Hulk Hogan existed. There were a ton of fans in different regions of the country when Hogan was super popular who were not paying money to see him. They were paying money to see Ric Flair and the Four Horsemen and the Rock and Roll Express and the Von Erichs and Dusty Rhodes. The wrestling business, as I wrote my report today on Smackdown and PWTorch.com, I put a commentary in there saying the ebb and flow, the peaks and valleys of wrestling's evolution would be different without Hogan, but pro wrestling would be around because it's damn entertaining and it survived a lot without Hogan. Stone Cold Steve Austin would have been a wrestler. Triple H was a fan before Hogan existed. So I think people overstate that. If you take their words literally, we wouldn't be doing this. We wouldn't be here today. WWF would be in business today, or another major company would be without Hogan. Just would have been a different path, a very different world we live in because Hogan of course, took wrestling to new heights with the Rock and Wrestling Connection on MTV, Saturday's Main Event on NBC, the Superdome crowd. And I mean, there are just things that happened. You know, Johnny Carson wouldn't have had a lot of wrestlers on, but Hogan was special. He was so larger than life. So absolutely the national expansion was different because of Hogan. But come on, pro wrestling wasn't going to, after thriving for decades before Hogan, it wasn't going to magically go away just because Terry Bollea didn't get into pro wrestling. That's silly, you know? So it's a nice thing to say, but too many people say it too often and no one pushes back. And I'm just like, that's just crazy talk.
We see it in every form of anything, in every form of entertainment, every sport. Someone comes along that's the greatest thing, but someone else would have been the greatest thing if they weren't there. He just happened to, his head stood above the rest, and he was the one that the marketing machine got behind, you know, and he deserved it. You know, it was his charisma and his talent. He brought a lot to the table. It wasn't simply the steroids that just kind of gave him that extra, you know, appearance that he needed. But I thought it was interesting that Joe Tessitore also referred to Hogan as, to the wrestling industry, he was as transformational as any other modern athlete, such as, I think he referenced Jordan.
Ironically, four black guys.
Yeah, and I thought of that. I thought that was, it seemed like a choice to only name them.
Yeah, I mean,
but if you're thinking about some transformational athletes, they certainly all were.
I'm not sure who I don't know what white dude would surpass Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson and Tiger Woods and Michael Jordan, honestly. I mean, you could say Larry Bird and Babe Ruth, but Babe Ruth is a different era, and Larry Bird wasn't as big as Michael Jordan. He shared the stage with Magic Johnson. So, yeah, I mean, I think it was happenstance. It wasn't deliberate or meant to be ironic or a message in any way.
Yeah, it seemed like something, if they really caught that, they probably would have changed it. Yeah. But it also seemed hard to deny that Hogan's impact was at that level. Yeah.
So Mark Biscotti is saying none of us would be here right now if Hogan or Terry Bollea didn't spark the mainstream success in the 80s. And yes, he was a racist, a Trumper, Life is Strange, dead ass. The Von Erichs were on syndicated TV, household names in a lot of parts of the country. A little bit before Vince McMahon bought a bunch of syndicated spots around the country and made Hulk Hogan a national name. They were drawing big crowds at Texas Stadium. Kerry Von Erich was a huge star. If Vince McMahon had hired Kerry Von Erich soon enough to try to get him on the straight and narrow and promoted him, then Mark, I think we'd be talking about, you know, the difference Kerry Von Erich made in your life and brought WWF to mainstream success. I think there's a good chance of that. Had Vince McMahon not gotten Hogan, he would have had a lot of money and a lot of ambition to go to Ric Flair and go, you're something special. You're drawing these huge crowds everywhere you go. You're regarded by your peers as the best wrestler in the business and maybe the best ever. Come work for me. And I think Flair would have said yes to that money and that fame. I'm not saying any of them would have measured up to Hogan, but this idea that there couldn't be mainstream success. Ric Flair would have been phenomenal on The Tonight Show. He'd have been phenomenal on Saturday Night's Main Event, cutting those promos. And you know, would he have been as good in the Rock and Wrestling Connection? No, but I mean, I'm sorry, Paul Orndorff, Roddy Piper. I mean, the contributors to Hulk Hogan's success. Andre the Giant existed before him. There were stories to tell, larger than life stories to tell, with great wrestlers. And I don't know, you know, like, I mean, you can say that about sports. Like, well, if not for Michael Jordan, then what? Well, I mean, Clyde Drexler wasn't as charismatic. And if the Portland Trailblazers won, 3 championships, maybe the NBA would be smaller. But then other stars came along, and LeBron James probably still would have played basketball, and he's not going to be less of an athlete because Michael Jordan didn't exist. So sometimes the time frame is different, and the paving of the way for you is different. Maybe you have to do some heavy lifting to get things to another level. But Mark, I just disagree. When you say none of us would be here, I love pro wrestling before Hulk Hogan, and throughout Hogan's whole run, there were a lot of wrestling promotions without Hulk Hogan, drawing big crowds with wrestlers who fans loved and bought posters for and paid tickets to see. There were stadium shows and sold out 18, 20,000 seat buildings without Hogan. And as George Schreier talked about in that historically fascinating interview that I did with him yesterday, there was a boom period in the territories prior to Hogan that was going on. Hogan actually rode a wave of success that came in a few years before he became a big star. So Hogan rode a wave that was already existing to a degree in the territories, according to George and his tracking of attendance. So it's such a fascinating topic. Like I say, we're going to be doing more. I'm going to be talking to Kelly Wells from the PWT Talks NXT show about Hogan collectibles. Kelly's a specialist in collectibles. We're going to talk about Hogan's merchandising. And it was a big part of Hogan's career too, that it's not A-level topic, but it's not C and D. It's a B-level topic. Hogan's marketing of himself through Vince McMahon, of course, but it started in the AWA. I mean, Hogan was selling t-shirts. It's why he had a falling out with Vern Gagne. One of the reasons is Vern sold Hogan t-shirts without telling him and giving Hogan a cut. So Hogan was a forerunner there, and entrance music too. I mean, so there's so much about Hogan's career, Eric. That's just like amazing. But I do want to put, tap the brake pedal a little bit. The business existed and thrived before him. It thrived concurrently, even in major pockets of the country. And Todd Martin talked about this on The Fix on Thursday. Todd talked for nearly an hour about March through Hogan's entire career. And the VIP show, The Fix on Thursday. I did like 7 hours of podcasting yesterday on almost, the majority on Hogan. And there were pockets of the country that were not Hogan country, and he was being outdrawn by Ric Flair and other people in other parts of the country. So, I just think there's a myth. WWF has promoted it for decades. Pro Wrestling Torch as a brand for nearly 4 decades now has been pushing back on propaganda to go, let's not let this become the official history. There is an objective truth that is different than what WWE, for the most part, no fault of their own, propagates an image that props up their brand. And that's fine. That's good for them to do. But don't look for them to tell the full and complete, fair, honest truth on the history of this business. Their job is to promote themselves. And I think they've, told enough truth that people think everything is true. And a lot of it is exaggerated. And some of the people pushing the untruths don't even know it anymore. They just bought into it because WWE's repeated it so long over the years. So
it's a business about hype. I mean, there were not 93,000 people at the Pontiac Silverdome.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And even what you're saying, I know it might be hard for some people to think about and try to process now that, wait, it wouldn't have been the same without him. They wouldn't have still hit, high highs. But I don't think you're really taking away from what he did accomplish either. Like, it's not changing what he was able to accomplish and what him and Vince McMahon were able to accomplish together.
And Mark Pescetti in the chat in response to his previous post said, I subscribed to Pro Wrestling Torch newsletter in early 94 after Hogan left the WWF. Him leaving brought me further into the business, just as his stardom attracted me in the first place. I think a lot of people, too, confuse the age that they get attracted to pro wrestling with and who the top star is, and think it's because of the top star that they watch wrestling. And there's no question that's the case sometimes. But what makes you think that the person who got talked about as a hero, got all the big wins, was at the beginning of the show in the opening, had a great entrance music, and all the heels beat up, and he made comebacks and ultimately beat them? Whoever that was, if not Hulk Hogan, what makes you think he wouldn't have had the stardom to attract you? Maybe not at the level Hogan did in the masses. Probably not, because Hogan was special. I'm not taking that away. But, it's like when people talk about, oh, we can't be without this guy because of his merch sales. I'm like, people go to shows and some of them go, I got $100 spent on merchandise, and they pick their favorite wrestler. And if one wrestler's not there, they're going to spend that $100 on someone else within reason. There's multiple top stars. So this notion that, Hogan is the reason you're in wrestling. No, I think you like pro wrestling and Hogan was a top star. And so you think, rightfully so, Hogan was a reason you watched, but someone else could have been in that spot you might have watched too, because pro wrestling has survived and thrived in so many different eras and so many territories and so many promotions with different top stars. Others have tried. Stone Cold Steve Austin succeeded because he was so different from Hogan. And if it weren't for that neck injury, he'd have had a legacy probably as long as Hogan as a top draw. And that's unfortunate. But anyway. Oh, and Derek Mitchell points out Magnum TA. We don't know what Crockett could have been if Magnum TA didn't have a car accident in 1986. There's a lot of what ifs. Yeah, Magnum TA was something special. Not great on promos, but just there was something about him. Go watch some footage on YouTube. Had he not been in a car accident and paralyzed, he would have been their lead babyface. He had some Hangman Page in him, or Hangman Page with some Magnum TA in him, and Hangman's doing good for AEW right now. And so, yeah, I mean, courses could change. And frankly, if Hogan weren't around, if Vince, in 84, 85 went with someone else, he might have poached Magnum and made Magnum a star. And Magnum could have been a huge star, crossover star, with his looks and his physique and his wrestling style and the way he showed fire in the ring. So that's the thing. There's so many, what ifs. And Chris Johnson says you can make the case in some ways wrestling might be better if Hogan hadn't existed. I think you can make that case. It's hypothetical. It'd be pure opinion, but but it's possible. Mark Pescetti with a super chat. I got to give him attention here. Thank you, Mark, for your generous super chat. Says, so good to hear you cover this, Wade. You bring so much history and direct experience to make this so fascinating. Thank you. Mark, thank you. Appreciate it very much. Let's pause and introduce the show. This is the latest we've gone, not introducing ourselves. The A block, as we call the opening topic, understandably bloated today. This is a Wade Keller Pro Wrestling post show for Friday, July 25th, 2025. I'm Wade Keller, host of the show, editor, publisher, and founder of the Pro Wrestling Torch weekly newsletter and the website PWTorch.com. In my Smackdown report at PWTorch.com today, I have links to 4 articles we've got posted on Hogan on the site. You can just click right to them. 2 of them are new by me. One of them is from 10 years ago by me. That's lengthy and worth a read. And Chris Griffin with his top 5 Hogan lasting contributions to wrestling is another one. And we have, I talked about the George Shire thing. We made it free for everybody through Apple Podcasts on the PW Torch VIP feed. There's a direct link to it in my Smackdown report. You can also search PW Torch in the Apple Podcast app and listen to it for free. There's other ways to listen to it for free too. If you search PW Torch and subscribe to the charcoal gray PW Torch VIP app or podcast feed, we give free samples on that in part 1 of the George Shire interview. So, 50 minutes of it is available right now. Really encourage you, if you enjoyed the last 15 minutes, especially of this show, you want to hear George and me talk about that. My co-host tonight to talk about tonight's SmackDown, which is a big part of Hulk Hogan tribute, but a lot else too, is Eric Corbridge. He is a PW Torch contributor and co-host here on some of our post shows. Eric, welcome back. Good to have you. And no, last time was all technical problems, wasn't it?
It was all technical problems.
And so today, I got rid of my dog quick. I love my dog, but he flips out when there's noise. So that is not as bad as what happened last time. So it's actually a really nice experience.
I hope my appearances don't just inspire weird kind of nights. Yes. It's definitely a different kind of night too. But it's hard to believe that in a week we have the second biggest show of the year for WWE. Oh, yeah. And it's hard to focus on anything else other than the, arguable biggest star in the wrestling industry over the last 40 years, passing away 24 hours ago. Yep. But they did accomplish a lot tonight, even if the matches didn't accomplish a whole lot. They still pushed towards SummerSlam, even if most of the matches were kind of throwaway. Yep.
And Cody gave a promo and he talked about Hogan, but he also talked about his match with Cena. We'll get into that. We had chaos at the end. Joe Tessitore is so great. And Wade Barrett and him are just so good. But the way he talked about the chaos at the end of the show, and oh my God, we're gonna get a tables, ladders, and chairs match. Just he gets very he gets a high score for. He could drop him into any era. I mean, he could drop him into 1975, 1981, and he would be among the best announcers and totally fitting the notion that you're there to call it like a sport and call it like it's real. It's as important for announcers to do that as it is for wrestlers to try to make sure their moves look snug and don't show light and don't miss. Wrestlers work hard to make moves look real. They do not always succeed, but they work hard and usually succeed. And the goal is to make them look real, to pull people in. The announcer shouldn't be joking around and acting like it's too silly to take seriously. Sometimes it is too silly to take seriously, but I like an announcer who still finds a way to do it. And Joe Tessitore has found that tone. So anyway, we are here to talk about everything that happened on SmackDown, and the chat room is open as always on our YouTube channel. If you are listening to us on the podcast side of things on delay, you're invited to join us live after Raw, Dynamite, and SmackDown. Those are the shows I host on the PW Torch YouTube channel. Just search PW Torch or Wade Keller. You should find the page. We also have links to it in my reports at PWTorch.com. And you can also email us, wadekellerpodcast@gmail.com. wadekellerpodcast@gmail.com. That way you don't have to watch us on YouTube to be part of the show. You can watch the wrestling show, email us, and then listen later to see if your email made the show. And finally, you can be a video or audio caller. The link to that is reserved for our Patreon and VIP supporters. And the link is in my VIP TV report at PW Torch VIP right now. And I think that covers it. Yeah, if you're not subscribing to all our podcast feeds, we have 4 of them. Search Wade Keller to get the red logo show, and also the blue logo show, which is our main podcast, which included the flagship last Tuesday with Greg Parks, and will include pay-per-view previews, interviews, and more, and also media Q&As with like Tony Khan and Paula Beck and stuff. There's a lot of stuff thrown on that's not part of our YouTube channel, so you want to subscribe to that if you're discovering us on YouTube. And then also search PWTorch, and you can get the PWTorch Daily Cast, which includes the PWT Talks NXT show and a different show each day of the week with a different theme, plus that free sample feed of VIP shows that'll pop up, the charcoal gray PWTorch VIP logo. All right, so let's shift back to, we'll talk more about Hogan. I want to throw in some reader comments, but because we gave so much time to it in the first 40 minutes of the show here, let's go ahead and talk about a little bit more about SmackDown proper, and let's talk about Cody's promo. You can talk about what he said about Hogan if you want, Eric, add anything. But otherwise, talk about how the follow-up to the John Cena rightfully mocked contract signing, just using his hand and signing it. I mean, that's not how things work. I think the idea is contract signings are sort of ceremonial. Of course, the match is going to happen. Cena was saying, I don't want to wrestle because I need to be at 100%. So he was trying to clearly weasel his way out of a match. It wasn't going to work. And Cody's like, if you're going to be, that lame, I'm going to just sign your name to the contract. What are you going to say? You're going to really not show up. So what do you think of the follow-up, and what do you think about the main theme of the interview or of the promo, which is, I want to face the real John Cena, the guy who runs to the ring wearing the belt the right way. I want my title reign and my journey to mean something, and beating that Cena is important to him. I don't know if we'll get it, but what do you think about that as Cody's wish and tone tonight, Eric?
So my first thought was that it was the classic wrestling mindset where, hey, if you're going to come out and say your opponent's not a nobody, then you're beating a nobody. So this was kind of like a mirror of that. So he's saying, I don't want to beat this John Cena who just wants to get out of here and doesn't mean anything anyway. I want to beat the guy. So when I beat the guy, I really beat the guy. Mm-hmm. That's what came across to me. Mm-hmm. What really rung home most was how emotional he got about it. He looked like he had tears in his eyes. And I'm thinking, okay, good job pulling from that. It will, for me, going into SummerSlam, when I watch that match, I will understand why Cody wants to beat him more. It makes a lot more sense to me now, because I felt like not only was the contract signing flat, just the idea of hyping up a street fight as a big deal was flat. I understand why they need to do a street fight, especially after what we saw at WrestleMania, but a street fight in itself is not that big of a deal.
The dog knocked on the door, wanted to come back in. He has to be good, though. I let him in. Yeah. I thought this was a really good Cody babyface promo. Unapologetically earnest, sincere, straightforward, not fancy. And it had a message. And this is the thing that I like about Cody. And I was going to name a couple names. I won't. There's wrestlers who their secondary goal is to sell their match and pull people into a sports-like vibe about what the match means to them. And their main goal is, I need to be entertaining. And they confuse over-the-top, buzz-generating, go viral video clips that's going to give them that sugar rush on social media afterwards. They mix that up as they put a priority on that, but they lose track of the fact that the most entertaining promos are the ones that aren't necessarily, depending on your character, but for the most part aren't about catchphrases or insider comments or any. It's just about being true to yourself and what fans like about you and what makes them want to see you either win or see you lose. And Cody gets that. I mean, I'm not saying he doesn't think, how can I be entertaining, but like, and if he tried it, he might know I'm not good at it. Some people, don't sing karaoke for a reason, even though it'd be fun. Maybe he wishes he could be entertaining, but it's not natural to him to be entertaining in that so-called quote unquote modern way. But I admire that just timeless, wholesome. Here's who I am. I'm a good person. I want this title reign to mean something, and for it to mean something, I want to beat the real Cena, Eric.
Yeah, and I think you hit on something where Cody has existed as a main eventer without catchphrases at all. He hasn't needed them. I would say conversely, as well as he's doing, Jacob Fatu has started to slip into the catchphrases have to be involved in every single time he speaks. And it detracts a little bit from him, in my opinion. But Cody has not needed any. CM Punk doesn't really need any, even if he wants to welcome people to say how great it is to be in a city. He hasn't really needed them either. So if you can thrive and have promo segments where you're talking almost every show and not need catchphrases, you're doing something right. Oh, I think you're muted, Wade.
I think on Monday, I was wouldn't say, I don't know if critical's a word, observant of the fact that CM Punk's promo was a fine Cody Rhodes promo. But people look for something different from Punk. You know, they want a fire burning inside of him. They want him to have a chip on his shoulder. And there's something weird about seeing CM Punk be polite, level-headed, doesn't seem to have angst, isn't distressed or fretting over things. And it's weird. And it was a fine promo. Like, it wasn't a bad promo, except for the fact that people want something different from Punk. And I don't think Punk's as good as Cody at that style of promo. Punk's not a bad promo in any context, really, but the expectations for him are bring a fire, have a chip on your shoulder. And that's not Cody. Cody knows who he is. And this just, worked. Like Standard Deviation said, good point. I never realized Cody doesn't actually use catchphrases. The opening line ticks the box. What are we going to talk about? But that just allows the meat of the promo to avoid them. Derek Mitchell said, with Hulk Hogan's death, I feel like Cody Rhodes is the quintessential babyface, like Hogan and John Cena, in the most purest form. So, yeah, I mean, I like having a baseline, and I believe this in like TV shows, you kind of need them too, a baseline character, the normal person who everyone else is in contrast to. If everybody's crazy, kind of nobody's crazy relative to anything else, and Cody is that foundation. And that's what I grew up with Vern Gagne. I mean, Vern Gagne was the normal guy, and a lot of territories had that. George Shire and I talked about that yesterday. That Vern was, and that's what made Hogan stand out so much, is Vern was the normal guy, the father figure. And different territories had different people. Sometimes it was ethnic based or locally based, whether it's Jerry Lawler, Bruno Sammartino. Certainly the Von Erichs getting a little bit more modern. And there's something about having, somewhat normal, not bland, but also not bombastic and over the top, just regular people around which everyone else seems relatively crazy relative to. Eric.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like you take someone that has a lot of charisma that kind of jumps off the page. We mentioned Hogan and John Cena. And then if you can still give them that, baseline character where everybody else is the insane person and they're just the normal people in a world of chaos, it works. And it's probably even more impressive that Cody's able to pull it off in this day and age. We've gotten past the cheering for the anti-hero, and he's managed to survive in an environment after that and still thrive. So I think it's a testament to him for sure.
And I, part of it is the era we're in. I mean, there's one of the reasons that ECW gained the passionate, it was relatively small compared to a lot of things, but the passionate following and why it was so influential for promotions with bigger platforms, WCW and WWF, obviously, especially, is because it was so in contrast to what came before it. The bland early 90s period where everyone was just trying to figure out what to do. Vince was trying to figure out post-Hogan, what is it? Oh, Bret Hart. We had steroid scandal. Now we need the relatively boring, straightforward, wholesome babyface. What's that?
Lex Luger.
That
experiment.
Yep. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, and I was talking to people in WWF at the time debating, Lex Luger or Bret Hart. And, Vince wanted Lex because it reminded him of Hogan and he was super muscular and he didn't get Bret. And there were forces in WWF. Jerry Jarrett was open with me on Torch Talk, so I can say that. He was one of the influential voices at that time behind the scenes, Jeff Jarrett's dad. And I talked a lot to Jerry, for interviews and also otherwise over the years. And he was an advocate for Bret. He said, you want your next top star to be different than the previous one so they don't get compared to them unless you have someone who's just clearly better. And Lex Luger wasn't better than Hogan in any way. I mean, his body fat percentage was lower, and that didn't even make him better, just like something, well, maybe Vince, I don't know. So when you go with someone who looks like a derivative pale comparison, you're asking for failure. And that's what made Bret work to the level he did, is Bret was so different than Hogan. But ECW was so different than the staid, formulaic WWF and WCW at that time. And what happened is we got through, the Attitude Era and, the John Cena era, and there was, booing of Cena and booing of Roman. And we've gotten to a point where a character like Cody can simply be cheered. Yeah. And I think it's something to end up studying. I don't know if we're quite ready to draw a conclusion on why. Why did pro wrestling fans stop rebelling against baby faces and like Cody? Is it unique to Cody, or is it more so not Cody? Could have been anyone who's like Cody, but it's more the era we're in. Maybe there's too much cruelty in the world in the last 10 years, through social media, just hateful comments and harassment. Certainly politics has taken a worse turn. Maybe people want their entertainment to be a little bit more, I want someone who just seems like he's a cool dude, which is why I was, kind of triggered and disappointed in Cody saying, about Saudi Arabia, that people are playing gotcha. And it's like, no, people are bringing up very sincere feelings of disappointment, in a form of entertainment for doing something that they believe is done for the wrong reason. So Cody has to be careful. And that's why I thought tonight was wonderful from him to say, I know people have complicated feelings about him. And then he went to the facts of his drawing power, but didn't, throw a bunch of praise his way. I think Cody shows almost the vast majority of the time stellar instincts as a lead babyface. That's right for the times, Eric.
Yeah, absolutely. It's obviously it's interesting. We'll see how long this lasts now, because he was starting to get booed for a couple of weeks, but he's managed to push past that. Maybe it depends on what arena he's in, but if he's a heel this time next year, I mean, we'll see where we're at, but it won't take away from anything he's doing right now.
And I thought tonight too was, showed why Cody shouldn't turn babyface anytime soon. But there is a possibility that Cody is saying, I want the old Cena, because Cody's going to turn heel and be completely different. And tonight, what we saw on SmackDown was a facade, trying to lower Cena's guard, and he has sold out to The Rock, and that's why he's wearing those Rock-like sunglasses last week. The little Easter egg given to us. I mean, I'm not ruling that out. And I think lowering people's guard with this wholesome, pure interview makes a turn all the more dastardly. It's why the Hogan turn works so much. I don't know why Hogan said in his book people are still cheering him after he turned, and joined formed the NWO with Hall and Nash. He's like, and people still cheer. It's like, no, they're throwing trash at the ring. They were. I mean, there was, yes, cool heels had their thing. Hall and Nash were cheered. Hogan was booed. Maybe that hurt his feelings, but Hall and Nash got ironic, rebellious, anti-hero cheers, but people just were upset with Hogan for turning. So, I don't know why maybe he forgot, or I don't know. I don't know. That's a whole other topic.
But just been thrilled that he was being booed.
I know. Yeah. It was just another weird comment that stood out. Because I didn't think it was to his advantage. I think he should have said, I think it's when he was talking about the match with The Rock and how, but I don't know, maybe it was just marching through his history.
Well, I was at that match with The Rock, WrestleMania 18.
Yeah.
I'll never forget how I was standing outside the arena with some friends. We had driven up I live in Maryland, and we had gone up there, and we were waiting outside the arena, and they were having a hard time letting people in. And to the point that some of the pre-show stuff had already started, and people that were clamoring to get in, probably most of them Canadian, were singing Real American at the top of their lungs and just blasting it, just cheering and singing it outside the arena. And I was thinking then, Hogan's supposed to be the heel tonight. I bet it's not going to go that way. And I don't know if people were talking about it, or if you were talking about how Hogan was probably going to get cheered. I imagine you probably were. But I know for me, I was surprised, thinking I'm going in to watch babyface Rock versus heel Hogan, and it was clearly not going to go that way. And so I'll always remember that.
The cool part is we have back issues of the Pro Wrestling Torch newsletter. You can go read. And if you want to know what I thought about anything since like 1988, you can read read what I thought. Sometimes I have to go back and read to remind myself what I thought, because I forget sometimes as decades go by. That Hogan was being booed in WCW when his babyface run petered out, and they were just thinking, okay, his value's dropping. And Hogan elevated, this is a whole separate topic, but Hogan elevated, what Hall and Nash were doing, but Hogan couldn't have done it without Hall and Nash and the Outsiders and the jump and the cool factor that they gave Hogan again. That was a symbiotic relationship that I would put around 50-50, and I do not appreciate or like, and it's not because I've known and interviewed, and I don't know. I mean, I've known and interviewed Hogan too, so I shouldn't say it, but Hall and Nash I've spent a lot more time talking to over the years than Hogan. And I don't buy the notion. I don't like history saying that Hogan made this whole thing work, because it was working. Like, that was amazing when Hall showed up and said, I got a buddy coming next, and I think that the outsiders would have worked without Hogan, not at the level it did, but Hogan needed them and they needed him to get to the level they got to, but Hogan needed them more than they needed him to have a successful couple years in that gimmick, because Hogan was running out of steam as a babyface, and Hall and Nash had momentum as the outsiders, and they could have assembled other heels and been effective. So as much as Hogan did to boost things by being with Hall and Nash and forming the NWO, Hall and Nash would have been fine, and Hogan would have floundered if they didn't unite. So I don't know.
Although Hogan probably could have turned heel separately and not been in the NWO and still had the same impact. So
yeah, I think you're right. He could have turned heel separately, but there was something about Hogan standing in the ring with Hall and Nash that gave him a cool factor that I think would have looked like cosplay if he weren't standing next to them. Like, what is Jimmy Hart going to turn heel and stand with him? He can seem like a cartoon. There was this kind of edgy street cred that Hall and Nash had. They were just two cool dudes in real life too, and without that, it would have been different. I'm not saying it wouldn't have worked, but like Hogan was just a cartoon character floundering, and I think if he turned heel, he might have seemed that way without the influence of Hall and Nash. It's an interesting historical what if to debate, or just explore. You don't have to debate, to explore. Interesting. All right, let's bring Jason D from Australia into our conversation. I'm good to see Jason this week. Jason, welcome. Big couple days here.
Yeah, thanks, Wade and Eric. I just wanted to say, I think you're being really fair in your analysis, Wade, about Hogan. And, you're fair to bring up the negative points and you're fair to bring up the positive. And I think for a lot of people, they struggle because it's almost like we need to, when we have an opinion of someone, we need to file them in a certain folder and say, this is how they were, and kind of leave it at that. But complex. And I think for a lot of people that they struggle with how much Hogan meant to them growing up and the character that he portrayed and the message, and that conflicts with the things that we've heard about later on, the negatives. But that's okay. Like, it's okay to feel awkward. It's okay to feel negative. That's just part of life. And it's okay just to leave it at that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You mentioned the positives, you mentioned the negatives. They're not mutually exclusive. That's just the way it is. Yeah. And, I thought what Cody said tonight, it's complex. And that's just the way I look at it. The thing about it regarding Hogan is that at the end of the day, Terry Bollea was portraying a character, Hulk Hogan. Yet, because of the nature of wrestling back in the day and how it is, it's like he had to play that character all the time. And I've always wondered, you have an interview with Hogan, right? And it was hard because sometimes you feel like, he would twist things or embellish. I always wanted to know, and even asking John Cena this, what did it do to you when you have to meet these Make-A-Wish kids and you have to be the shining light for them in this moment while you're meeting these poor kids who have these diseases and the families are crying and all the rest of it? What did that do to you? How did that affect you? And did it take a lot out of you? Did you end up becoming desensitized to it? What the pressure that was put on for you in this real human situation, yet you feel like you've got to play this character? What did it do to you? And also from Hogan's point of view, no doubt back in the day, we've heard the stories of wrestlers coming up to him and thanking him for the house. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The pressure that put onto him, because no doubt he's looking after himself, but he's thinking, I have to stay on top here and I have to do the right thing because a lot of the wrestlers and their families are depending on me.
I don't think that crossed his mind as often as you think, Jason. Sorry. I don't think Hogan
really
thought I need to keep rest. I think he would have had a busier schedule. I just don't think it was his nature. I don't think Hogan was altruistic in much of what he did. Frankly, but a lot of us are very motivated by things that aren't altruistic. There's all kinds of things we could give up that are luxuries to bring someone else to a baseline, level of sustenance that we don't. But no, I think Hogan was trying to maximize his fame and his money. And a side effect was wrestlers like being on shows he headlined because the crowds were bigger. I think he appreciated the power it gave him and the influence it gave him, but I don't think he felt like an obligation to work shows he didn't want to work for less money because I owe it to the wrestlers underneath. Just to be, I mean, honestly, I don't think there's many wrestlers who felt that way. It's not just, I'm not picking on Hogan. I don't think many top wrestlers are like,
maybe I'm thinking too kindly of him. Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. In any event, though, I want to go to Cody's promo, talking about that he wants to see the best of John Cena, like the real John Cena. And this has been a pattern with Cena's opponents, because CM Punk mentioned this when he was facing John Cena. I still believe that there might be Anakin Skywalker under this Darth Vader. We heard Randy Orton say to John Cena, listen, the reason why you're like this, you just need kids, John. Have some kids. And then Cena went against that. And even R-Truth said, I still believe that there's Cena in there. So what we're seeing is that with Cena's main opponents that he's had, and even Cody said this at the beginning when he was facing Cena, they've always left it open that the real John Cena is there, that he's almost just playing this bad guy role and it's not really him. And now it's coming full circle where at SummerSlam, do we see a moment, do we see something where Cena does finally revert back to the real John Cena and be that good guy? Because I feel like they've left the door open with the promos that his opponents have been cutting.
Eric, what do you think?
I 100% expect that to happen. I mean, the last time we saw John Cena, he was 100% cowardly, but we've seen stuff creeping in. I expect there'll be a moment in the match. I don't know if it'll be the moment that cost Cena the title on Sunday, but I think there'll be a moment where he hesitates or something happens or R-Truth shows up and something happens there where he tries not to hit Truth and hesitates, and that's what cost him. But we're clearly on that path because we only have about 4 months left with him. So they got to start something if they want to make it gradual.
And I mean, Logan Paul was clearly, an issue. So I think they end up, revisiting that. I don't know if I don't know if there's a direct overlap of Cena as a heel and Logan Paul, or it's just a feud waiting for him, but it could be the impetus. But that might mean Cena doesn't turn babyface yet. He might. It might be a double turn. I mean, Jason, my answer is I'm open to all possibilities. I think WWE and Paul Levesque's booking, I think more so than Vince McMahon, books in a way, deliberately or through happenstance, I'm not sure. Probably a mix where there's like, you go into this match and it's like, well, probably Cody's going to beat Cena and Cena's going to be a heel and Cody's going to be disappointed. But there's another option, which is Cena shows up and wrestles the way that Cody asks him to, and he loses, and that makes him stay heel for another month because he thinks, I made a mistake, I shouldn't have done it, and they have a rematch or whatever. Or he decides to go hang out with Logan Paul and be a sleazebag, and then Logan's too much of a sleazebag for him, so he turns on him. Or they do a double turn. So my point is, all the scenarios, there's storyline support for all of them, or multiple scenarios. And I like that. You go into a match, you're like, I could see this being the result based on this, but someone else can go, but what about this? That points to this. And you go, well, that's true too. I think that's, there's some deliberateness on Levesque's part trying to put red herrings out there so that things are less predictable. And, or because he likes to make late decisions on what to do, he has, multiple options on where to go. Like, Alexa Bliss and Charlotte, he might not have known going in what he's going to do, might have been leaning towards Charlotte staying heel, but let's feel it out. Let's see where this goes. Let's see how the crowd responds and what their chemistry is like on screen. And he's, oh, no, this is working. This can turn Charlotte babyface. It's good for her. It's working. That kind of thing does, I think, happen where they go into something not sure what they're going to do, and they're going to feel it out with, as Vince McMahon called it, their live focus group every week.
Yeah, and while it's very, very unlikely, probably there's still money in the bank briefcase hanging out there that, in theory, could be used in this match if they really want to tease things up.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. No question about it. I mean, that's a weird thing hovering out there, and what's going on for real. Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, just regarding that, I mean, I know it's been talked about but when Seth landed on his foot, Cole was just so emphatic, like right there and then, he twisted his knee. Like he was so certain that he did it. That kind of gave it away to me. So if Seth Rollins turns up at SummerSlam, it wouldn't surprise me. You mentioned about
Jason,
Logan Paul. I thought he cut.
Pause, yeah. Jason. As far as that goes, it's also possible. Let's just throw this out there that Cole, multiple options, but Cole might have seen that spot and thought he doesn't know every move in every match. So he's just calling. He's like, oh, because instantly Seth sold it that he hurt his knee. I mean, instantly. And Cole's instinct is call it out. Oh, he might have hurt his knee. Didn't mean he was trying to sell it as real. It meant he was just calling Seth twisting his knee, which might have led to a spot in the match where Seth sold his knee for 10 minutes or 3 minutes. So I if I went back and rewatched it, maybe I'd have a more refined, strong opinion in one way or the other. But I don't think Cole reacting to a wrestler instantly grabbing his knee in pain and going, oh, he tweaked his knee or whatever the term was that you said. I don't know if that's a tell that he's trying to sell us on a legit injury. It might just be the way he would have called the match, even if it was just a worked injury part of a match. And it's just his instinct to react that way. I know you brought that up, Jason, before, and I'm just not sure. I mean, and maybe you've gone back and watched and said, no, it's different than a normal sell.
I thought it was different than a normal sell.
Yeah.
I thought it was. It didn't look like, I mean, what would I know? I don't know, but that whole thing seems a bit weird. But in the event, moving to Logan Paul, I thought he had a really good promo. People said, thank you, Logan, and all the rest of it. That was quite funny. But then Jelly Roll, I mean, you can tell that he has watched wrestling. He studied it because he cut an earnest babyface promo. He was believable, the way he came across. And even what I thought he did in the ring looked quite impressive for someone like that. So, hey, man, you got to take his hat off to him because he's obviously a fan and he knows what to say and how to come across. And he's taking it seriously. And that's the most important thing. He's not winking and nodding. He is taking this seriously. And I think that's all us fans want. When we have a celebrity come in, take it seriously.
Yep. He got, I mean, there's a weird tone in pro wrestling when you're an outsider that you have to hit to feel like you get it. And if you don't watch a lot of wrestling, you will not get that tone that wrestling fans expect. And it's hard to explain it. You just sort of have to watch enough wrestling to know and then be good enough to portray it. And Jelly Roll has it. I mean, not every celebrity does. I don't know what percent do, but Jelly Roll's in the top, top fourth, kind of the top tier. If you break it into, way above average, below average, or way below average, he's definitely way above average in terms of striking the right tone. Do you agree with that, Eric?
Oh, I thought he was incredible. He's won me over. I groaned when he first got involved. But after tonight, I'm fully sold. I mean, I hope he's not going to try to do too much in the match itself. But like Jason said, he sold me on his provo. He was so believable. He seems so comfortable. I know he's a polished performer, so I'm sure that has a lot to do with it. He's comfortable being out in front of a crowd like that. But yeah, I was nothing but impressed.
Yeah. Jason.
Who are you guys predicting going to win between Jade Cargill and Tiffany Stratton? Because this is one match where I can't decide who I think is going to win.
What do you think, Eric?
I think they have to pull the trigger on Jade. I think they need to. Otherwise, if she loses this one, I don't know where she goes from here.
I don't know, Jason. I mean, if you ask me for pick, I lean towards Jade, but I mean, that's also possible. They're thinking they're going to go a different direction. Like sometimes I catch myself thinking it's either A or B. Either wrestler A wins or wrestler B wins, and there's an outcome. And sometimes the wrestler you don't expect to loses because they're telling a story with the wrestler who wins that's different than you expect, or the wrestler who loses that's different than you expect. And Jade obviously was a babyface tonight, but I'm not ruling out they're not going to go a different direction with Tiffany or Jade. Ultimately, in SummerSlam, it's part of telling that story, so it makes the framework of who's going to win between these two emerging top baby faces who are getting pushes but are sort of green different if a month from now they want one of them to be in a very different place. So I don't have a strong feeling on that because I just don't have a window into how they feel about them in this case. But I mean, it's one of the top matches on night one.
I would prefer they get Tiffany away from the championship and give her some sort of story to build her character a little bit more, because they've really done very little with it.
Mm-hmm.
I also had a question about tonight. Presumably that Jade Cargill Chelsea Green match was not advertised, right? I didn't see it.
Yeah, that was weird. Yeah.
So apparently we can now make matches by just attacking someone backstage and dragging them to the ring, and you just let them in the ring. That's a new one.
I'm not a fan of what happened there. It just feels like they made something up on the spot and didn't feel like it needed any explanation. Same with Cody signing the contract last week for Cena. It's like, I mean, why, how did this happen? I mean, what else happened recently that was just like that? Yeah. There's just sometimes, I don't know if it was AW or Raw, but yeah, I mean, just kind of explain it or have a reason. Don't just throw in the towel and go, it doesn't matter. We're just going to have an impromptu match because someone threw someone else into the ring. What is a rule if a referee runs to the ring that's illegal binding? Like, we have this contract signing deal. Don't the wrestlers have to agree that there's a match? Like, I would like a little consistency to the structure of how matchmaking works. And it feels like a needless, sloppy, storyline crutch that they went to that I don't think is worth it. It was efficient, but.
And I want to talk to, I can give them some leeway tonight because maybe they had to like rework the show for all the Hogan stuff. So I get that, but it was bizarre. And there were some other bizarre things tonight like that, but I was chalking up to a weird night.
Yeah. Jason, anything else you want to bring up?
Well, looking at the SummerSlam card, it's very interesting the way they've structured night 1 and night 2, because now we have this TLC match coming up, right? You'd have to assume that that's going to be on night. You would imagine that, because night 1 actually features 3 tag matches with the Roman match, the women match, and the Randy Orton match in Jelly Roll, right? That's 3 tag matches. If you look at night 2, there's 5 matches so far that have been announced, and all of them are title matches.
Yeah.
They're all the title matches. And you've got Cody and Cena on the same night as Rhea, Io, and also Naomi. Now, I would have thought you could have argued that could have been a main event of one particular night. So it's just interesting the way they've structured out this card. It seems to me very lopsided on, I'm not saying star power, but just the way they've structured it. It's an interesting choice.
I'm interested in, now that we have the night breakdown, does Roman Reigns get the main event spot? The WrestleMania night 1, CM Punk headlines WrestleMania, even though there's no title on the line type thing, with Roman and Jay against Breakker and Bronson. Or is it Gunther and Punk, which should be the main event? That world title needs to not be the opening match on a pay-per-view, the Alberto Del Rio position. Punk went through that when he was champion, and the only times he ever headlined a pay-per-view as champion was against Rock or John Cena. Otherwise, he was always in the undercard. It took one of those two to elevate him to main event. I don't think you should do that to him now that he's getting a title shot, and I think it diminishes Gunther, who is very valuable to their immediate future. So, I mean, they're not going to headline with Tiffany and Jade. I think they could if Tiffany and Jade were better, because they're big stars, they're emerging stars. It's a major title. We could have that discussion. Orton and Jelly Roll against Drew and Logan could headline if this show was weaker. Then you could just go, this is a big enough celebrity match, and Orton and Drew are big, former world champions, big name. Logan Paul's crossover celebrity. You could make a case for that on night 1 if you had a weaker undercard, but they don't. So I think it really does come down to, does Roman or do Gunther and Punk headline? Eric, what's your prediction on that?
On what headlines?
Yeah, night 1. Yeah, Roman or Punk and Gunther? I
strongly think it'll be Punk and Gunther, and I think there's the added possibility of a Money in the Bank cash-in that is right there. And if something like that's going to happen, that would necessitate it being a main event. I was more surprised that the triple threat women's match wasn't on Saturday, because to me that was the debate. Was it going to be CM Punk, Gunther, or that match? I'm a little surprised because we make the case that yes, the men's world heavyweight championship belongs in a main event. But you can also make the case that women's championship belongs in the main event too.
No, I'll say
we need a 3-night SummerSlam apparently.
Well, don't even. I think one of the issues looking at the 2 nights is night 1 is more stacked, and night 2 is more lopsided. You got Cena and Cody, and that's the formula. We can sell tickets on Cody Cena. And so, but Becky and Lyra could be on any TV show any week. Solo and Jacob in a cage. Okay, it's in a cage, but and Jacob Batu's over, but it's a mid card match, in a PLE environment. Same with Dominic and AJ for the IC title. So the night 1 is deeper with Gunther Punk, the celebrity match, Tiffany Cargill. I would even say that the women's tag, is bigger deal in some of the matches on night 2. And obviously Roman Reigns making his return. Sami Zayn is not a nothing match, but it's obviously like Dom and AJ. It's going to be one of the lower aspects of it. But to me, maybe Naomi, Rhea, and Io are on night 2 because they just felt they needed the 2 biggest world title matches, one men's, one women's, to make up for the fact that they were loading up night 1 otherwise with Roman, with a celebrity match, with Gunther Punk, with Tiffany Jade. So my thinking is it might be a bit of a compliment, but also a lost opportunity for Rhea, Io, and Naomi to actually headline night 1, which I think they could get away with doing. But then to do that, they would have had to move, say, Orton and Jelly Roll to night 1, which would have been fine. So yeah, to be into match order, we won't know till we see match order, and also where they add the TLC match, and what night that ends up on. I assume night 2, just because that it's 5 matches to 6 right now. Otherwise, so yeah, we'll see match order and maybe and match outcome, like you say, Eric. There are factors like cashing in Money in the Bank, or happy endings versus controversial endings, clean endings versus shenanigans. That dictates match order too. So you can't fully. Sam Roberts and I used to do shows regularly previewing WWE pay-per-views, and we'd just spend half hour talking about match order and the decisions that go into it. But you can't decide ahead of time unless you're privy to what the booking plans are. That obviously has to do with the pace and what you want to end on.
I'll be curious to see how this unfolds over the years now, since this is the first 2-night SummerSlam. I don't think it's fair to compare it to WrestleMania. They're 2 different entities. But will they feel the need to put, the number 1 match always on night 2 of Sunday? Or will they think more people are going to watch on Saturday because it's the middle of the summer? Who knows? No, I'm curious.
Yeah, it's different. My inclinations are going to treat it just like WrestleMania, honestly. I mean, I don't think they have to, and they might not always. But I don't think there's something about SummerSlam that caused them to think, let's have the climax of our wrestling fans 2-night event happen on night 1. I think they want a really good night 1 show, but they want to promote the biggest show so people tune in night 2. But you can it would be smart to change that up and make sure people don't ever skip night 1. Now, some of this will do with their viewership numbers. Eric, they're going to look at, how are we doing? It's night 1 lagging. Well, let's put the biggest match on night 1, but we'll use night 1 with that big audience to promote night 2 and get people excited about it, even if the biggest match headlines night 1. I wouldn't rule that out, but I think it's as likely to happen on a WrestleMania as a SummerSlam. Maybe not. Maybe WrestleMania main eventing. Maybe that's your point.
Well, my head was going to the way they structured Saturday night's main event in the past, where you wouldn't have the main event be the number 1 match. They wanted when there was the most viewers. They wanted people there. At the peak time. So if they have some sort of research that shows, well, maybe Saturday is a stronger night for viewership, we want to make sure to load up. And then maybe they think if they load up, they'll get more people to come back Sunday and watch.
Jason, what do you think?
Well, the thing about Sunday is that right now, if we assume the TLC match will be put on the Sunday, I mean, right now, the 5 matches are all title matches. You put the TLC one, it'll be 6 title matches on Sunday. So that gives people every incentive to watch on Sunday. I mean, but it's also going to be Cena and Cody, right? So that's
I don't think title matches make people more excited. I think people are more excited about Roman's match than they are half the title matches. Like, I mean, when 9 out of 12 matches are a title match, I think you're watering down the actual impact of a match being a title match, Jason.
I know what you're saying, but it's just because it's a title, some people are going to naturally think it's important, even if it's not in reality as important as a Roman match. But there's something to be said that every match on night 2 is a title match that gives you something to sell from night 1. And I think, a lot of us could have made the argument that Rhea, Io, and Naomi could have main evented night 1. But then, like you said, Wade, what's the booking decision? Because if we assume that Naomi's going to retain, which it looks like she is, right? I mean, they're not going to take it off for after a month. Do you want to leave with the heel retaining in some type of way on night 1? It's probably not what you want. You know what I mean? So it probably does look like it's going to be Gunther and CM Punk. So if it is Gunther and CM Punk main eventing on night 1, one would have to imagine we're going to get some type of interesting finish. Because as Seth said, he will never allow CM Punk to win a championship.
Derek Mitchell points out along these lines, there's more title matches at this year's SummerSlam than branded Night of Champions PLEs. Goodfella 1422 says, I don't think it's watered down. I think the big 2-night show out with all the titles, its biggest party of the summer. So
do you think this is the final card? I mean, there still are a couple more shows. They could easily add a Damian Priest, Aleister Black match. They could add a women's U.S. championship match.
My hunch is that one of those will be announced, either for SummerSlam or the Raw after SummerSlam weekend, where they, there's kind of that match you feel it could have been on the PLE, but we need to not make our network partners think they're, getting cheated out of big shows. So I could imagine Priest and Black being safe for this next Friday, and we get that announcement soon.
Well, they did it. They did announce that already. They announced that tonight. So
for next Friday.
For next Friday.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah.
So unless
why it's on my mind. Yeah.
Conclusive and they have a
Yeah.
rematch. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I would
Yeah.
sense this is the full card too.
Yeah.
6 matches per night seems about right.
I think the way they've done things, and especially, I mean, some of these are going to be longer. Some won't be super long. I don't think Cody Cena is going to be really long. I mean, even as Street Fight 4, I guess Street Fight, they can stretch it out more.
Well, they need to leave room for at least 15 minutes of commercials between every match.
That's the thing. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you can speed through commercials, you can start 45 minutes late, these PLEs, and get through them in a shorter window easily. Yeah. Some of the commercials, I think you just have to watch, though. So it's a crapshoot the way whatever settings they use. They keep you on your toes. Jason, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, just quickly, I thought it was a nice little touch. They it doesn't look like Julia's United States Championship is going to be defended on the card. So it'll probably be the only championship that's not defended. But the thing that Selena Vega said is that, people are too afraid to step up with her. And now Julia's got a representative in Kiana James. So that gives her something to do. And I kind of like that dynamic. It keeps Julia as a heel. She's got someone to sort of talk for her and to step up to other people. So at least they address that. So at least they're doing something there.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, Eric, you want to add to that?
No, same thing. Looks like Julia has a mouthpiece now. Seems like a good role.
Yep. Very good.
All right. Good on you, Wade. Like, I just wanted to point out, I think you're doing a very good job with your analysis of Hogan's passing. Obviously, myself, I wouldn't say I grew up a Hulkamaniac. He wasn't my favorite, but definitely the message that he sent across and that character and everything. So it's you tend to, I think I speak for a lot of people. It's like when someone of this magnitude passes away, it's kind of a shock. You're kind of expecting it. You knew the day was going to come, but when it happens, it sort of makes you look back at things and you play things through your mind, like what would have happened, like you guys were discussing. If he wasn't around, how does it change and everything? So it's just it's an interesting time, and just that's all I can say. I just think you're doing very fair coverage. I think you're covering it in the right way, and I appreciate your coverage. And it's just nice to see what other wrestling fans are saying, and it's just it's part of life, and we move on. But it's you have to acknowledge the impact that he has, and the impact he had on a lot of people's childhood, and it's sad. It's sad in a sense, but it's also you move on. It's just part of life, and as you get older, these things happen, and it just becomes a bit of a reality check. That's all.
Hey, when you're young, there's people you get to know, and they die. They die way young due to tragedy or disease or accidents, or they're just older people that who are celebrities. I mean, it's just like our lives are full of people dying before us, and then it stops when it's our turn.
Well, I just peeling back the curtain a little bit, Wade. Do you remember when Hogan and Flair came out to Australia back in 2009? Event here, and when do you remember that came to Australia? Mania tours, him and Flair.
You're breaking up enough. I wasn't able to fully pick up on what you were saying, Jason. Try again.
Do you remember, it was about 15 years ago, Hogan and Flair did a tour of Australia, and it was a press conference that Hogan did with Flair, and he bladed to sell the match, and a lot of the Australian media picked up on it as if it was real, but it was a great way to promote the match. Do you remember when Hogan came out to Australia about 15 years ago, just for like one-off events?
I don't. I probably wrote about it, but no, I don't remember right now that.
If you look back at it, yeah.
Yeah.
I got to meet him backstage, right? Through connections. I got to meet him, say blah, 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 all the rest of it. It was also the event that Umaga was one of his last events 3 weeks before his passing.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, and I actually got a photo with Umaga. It was a very nice photo, and I sent it to a wrestling journalist, and I think they passed it on to the family. I cropped myself out, so it was just Umaga putting his thumbs up. And I thought it was a very nice photo. But yeah, just looking back at that, that was a very nice photo of him, and I hope it got passed on to the family. And but yeah,
so nobody's ever going to know no one's ever going to know what you look like. Cut yourself out of a photo.
Oh, mate, this whole thing about what I look like, I just look like an average guy, man. Come on, I don't have to be. I remember Dr. Doom said he doesn't feel comfortable like looking at the camera talking. I'm kind of the same because my head's always moving around and I've got using my hands and everything. I think it'd be too distracting on camera. So that's why I choose. There's a reason why I do it, because you'd be like, just stay still, Jason. You're frustrating me.
Well, now I'm happy you don't come on the air. That would just be terrible.
Exactly. It would make for terrible vision. The audio is a lot better. But yeah,
I'm using reverse psychology.
15 years. Yeah. No, it's not working. But hey, good news. I'll be going to all Perth events. I managed to get tickets for all 3 of them. So Sweet. SmackDown, Raw, and Crown Jewel. And, it cost me about $170 a ticket. So to be honest with you, to go to all 3, and I've got pretty good seats. I can see the ring quite good. So I'm quite happy with that. So happy to be the correspondent and let you know what's going on.
Sweet. That's great to hear, Jason. Thanks so much. Always great talking to you.
All right. Thanks, guys. See ya.
Yeah. Very exciting. All right. Let's go to a couple emails that are not happy with WWE tonight. David Wolf from Washington, D.C. said, Wade, this tribute is making me nauseous, and it's now 100% clear Vince McMahon will be celebrated similarly after he dies. Thank you for recording rich fans' more appropriate tribute, so to speak, to Hulk Hogan. Zach Barber said, it's been a hot minute since I wrote in a WWE show, but I felt compelled to do so tonight. I knew WWE were not going to be able to resist acknowledging Hulk Hogan's death. Well, of course they're going to. They didn't have to. Anyway, they could have acknowledged his death without venerating an abject, unrepentant racist. Throw a graphic up and move on. Having the roster gather on the stage for a 10-bell salute and playing a 6-minute video package was entirely too much. Hogan was a despicable person who held abhorrent beliefs, and he didn't deserve all of this honoring. Contributions should never count more than character, and Hogan had no character. I'm just glad the black members of the roster were allowed to opt out of the 10-bell salute. Forcing them to honor a man who thought they were less than human would have been more than just a bad look. Cody was particularly disappointing tonight. As a man married to a black woman with a biracial daughter, for him to categorize a bigot's legacy as complicated and then think that said bigot is just tone deaf. I think AEW handled the situation perfectly, not even bothering to acknowledge that bigot is gone. Well, let's wait till Collision or Dynamite. I don't know if they've declared what they're going to do. So, Eric, I praised WWE. Is it because I expected them to not be as reserved as they were, but they actually are deserving of some criticism for a 10-bell salute and not just airing a video package at the beginning and having wrestlers on the stage? Is there a case to be made that there? I mean, the chat has not been as outraged as Dave and Zach. There's a pretty good sample size of people there. I watched it and felt like it was restrained and appropriate. And I think you did too, but what do you have to say to Dave and Zach's comments?
I mean, my first thought is everything they're saying is very, very valid, and I would never argue with it. If they're feeling the way they're feeling, then they're right about what they're feeling. I continue, maybe it's easier for me because I'm not black, maybe it's easier for me because it's easier for me to separate and think the 10-bell salute is for the Hulk Hogan character and not Terry Bollea, the human. I didn't grow up a Terry Bollea fan. That's just not how that was. Mm-hmm. So to me, and it was even difficult for me to reconcile in my own brain. Is it okay to have fun memories of what he accomplished? Or does that make me wrong? I've thought the same thing. I don't feel 100% comfortable with, when I'm thinking over the last 24 hours, I'm not thinking about the controversies. I'm thinking about some of the wrestling moments. Those are the things that were coming into my mind and making me feel nostalgic and sentimental. Those are the things I'm thinking about. But should I immediately let my next thought be, but let's not forget what this man did and who he was. It's something I've reconciled with. I don't feel like I have a perfect answer. So I would just say, I hear what was it, Zach and
Dave, yeah.
Zach and Dave. I hear what Zach and Dave are saying. And if Zach and Dave were my friends, I would want to sit there and just let them tell me how they feel. I would just want to hear what they had to say.
Yeah. Sadler version 3 says, I'm an anti-Hogan fan, but you would have to be naive to think they wouldn't have a video package for the biggest star in company history. I think the issue more is the 10-bell salute. Standard deviation said he fast-forwarded through that. And JC Scooby said, it was overkill with the 10-bell salute. Derek, let's see. The chat's filling up. By the time I click, something else has taken the spot under the floating thing that has a name for that I can't think of right now. Cursor, there it is. Derek Mitchell says, I can tell you, as a black man and lifelong wrestling fan, it's been a struggle with how I feel about Hulk Hogan, but letting you know Hogan is getting eviscerated on social media, particularly bad by black folks. The AP, by the way, Associated Press, ran a major story on black fans. Hulk Hogan's death resurfaces painful contradictions for black wrestling fans. And there's a long story on this. This is not just, the wrestling media or the, people who are pro AEW or anti Hogan or whatever on social media. I mean, this is a story that has risen to the Associated Press of all entities doing a major story on it. And I'm sure they're not alone, but that jumped out to me. And so it's something WWE's aware of, and they don't want to be caught seeming oblivious to. I think goodwill with to me, this felt like a show that had thought put into it. I don't think they didn't tell us how to feel about him. That's what I respect. They acknowledge facts. Like this guy, Drew Cody said it's complicated, and even for people who look at Hogan and say vile racist, and threw around the N-word, threw around the anti-gay F-word, that is 100% okay for you to feel that way. But I know people who are deeply disappointed in him, but still love him and see him as a complex person who had good traits too. And that wasn't because of how much time they spent with him and how much they knew him. That was not the defining moment for them, but it was a sad moment for them. And you can care for somebody and have a history with them and know them as a complex person and know that their worst trait and their worst handling of that trait being exposed publicly isn't the totality of who they are. But they also aren't going to say, and none of these people I've talked to who liked Hogan would say that they resent people for not having that be the defining trait, because it is so hypocritical. It is so vile. He should have held Hogan. I feel this way about, so many people in power and influence when it comes to standing up to terrible things going on in politics. Stop worrying about your pocketbook or the state of your business. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it helps more. I hope it helps more than it hurts, but it's not a factor when I speak out about things that are non-wrestling or tangentially related. I'm sure there's people who, when I speak out about stuff going on in politics, that they're like, oh, I can't, I don't like that Wade feels that way. I just want to talk wrestling. But I feel like there comes a line that gets crossed where you can't have that safe little cozy place where you go, well, we're not going to talk politics because that makes people uncomfortable. What makes people uncomfortable are, citizens being rounded up by masked agents who throw them without due process into prisons and send them off to a country, a third country. And then they go, oops, and bring them back a month later after they've been traumatized. I mean, that's horrible. And it's not unforeseen before the election. That's what people who were telling you not to vote the way half the country who voted. We're warning people, this is going to be awful. Like, it's going to be worse this time, and stop talking about the stock market. And he's not that good when it comes to that anyway. That's a myth. I can say all that, and it believe it in my heart, and I've lost sleep over it, and it's changed the course of my life for 10 years, and I'm disappointed in the way things have gone, and I can say that. And then I can sit here and be like, well, should I be? Is it good for my business? Well, I know a lot of people with a lot more money, a lot more power than me decide not to stand up for things that they believe in. So, and I'm disappointed in them too. Use your power and speak your heart, and, be informed enough where you're not just blathering about stuff. But that's how I feel about Hogan. Like, I think there's powerful people who need to speak up about, like Hogan, or at least as we saw tonight, temper what you might want to do in terms of PR spin. And I think they tempered probably some temptations to please the friends who they flew in to say glorious things about Hogan that weren't true or are less important than the bad things he said and did. So I don't know. To me, this was a prudent, reasonable, I don't want to say happy medium, because I think happy medium between something extreme and awful and something sort of okay but not great is still awful. So I don't think a happy medium or compromise is always the answer to everything. But I thought that this was a good, I'll put it this way, a good landing place, Eric, overall, even with Dave and Zach saying what they're saying.
Yeah, that was my sense. And I know I had a few conversations today and last night with, people that don't watch anymore, but they were so upset about this and didn't know there was all these controversies. And at first I'm like, do I want to tell them what happened and taint their childhood memories?
Yeah.
But I'm like, well, they should know. Like it's reality. Like, I could sit there and not tell them and maybe they'll find out on their own, but I might as well just tell them. They should know the full truth. And that's kind of what I defaulted.
I mean, you don't want to yuck people's yum, but you also don't want people to, like, they could be mad at you. Like, wait, you let me say all that stuff and you knew that and you didn't say something? I mean, you're not going to be perfect in these situations, and obviously there's a time and place for things, but I don't know. I just think there's good people who aren't speaking up too often about a lot of things, and I don't know. But like as far as Cody goes, Romeo in the chat says, I was shocked to even hear Cody say Hogan was complicated. I didn't think they'd go there, but I appreciated that being acknowledged. And that is how I felt. That's where I'm a little surprised by Dave and Zach. I was surprised Cody. Cody could have said, like, the thing that gets me is when people go, Hogan was always nice to me. I'm like, well, yeah, but the entirety of how you feel about someone shouldn't be how they treat you, especially if you're powerful, they have something to gain from you, or they feel an obligation to be polite to you because you're in the same business, or you have power, or they knew your dad, or something like that. Like, he was always nice to me. It doesn't feel like enough to decide all the bad things somebody does is shouldn't be part of the equation of how you speak about them.
It's the same thing you were saying about Vince McMahon. Everything comes out about him. Like, well, Vince was nice to me. He was always my friend. He did so much for me.
Yeah, or John Cena's stance on him. It's like, I mean, you can begin with that, but you should follow up pretty quickly with at least as many words going, but I am deeply disappointed and disturbed. I hope there's more to it than it seems. Haven't spoken to him on it. Whatever. I mean, everybody is, every situation's different, but yeah. Standard Deviation said, Sadler version 3 says, yeah, I was surprised Cody said complicated too. I thought he'd go full company mode. Jason D from Australia, Cody acknowledged the Vince McMahon case while Triple H dodged the question at the Royal Rumble 2023. So, yeah, I think that's why I was disappointed in Cody saying, gotcha. And maybe I not understanding the context, but when he was like, oh, when people bring up Saudi Arabia and political things, it's a game of gotcha. And it's like, no, it's people with sincere concerns and beliefs who hold you to a high standard and are disappointed in decisions that you're making by not speaking out against things your company is doing, and you have power. So anyway, let's shift to our on-site correspondent, Darren, who attended tonight in Cleveland. Darren, welcome to the show. Thanks for standing by while we had that discussion. How was it in the building tonight?
Hey, Wade. Good evening. Eric, good evening. Show was very good tonight. It's my first WWE show in 2.5 years. And of course, the first one under the TKO ownership. At the very beginning with the Hulk Hogan tribute, I was a little leery about how the crowd would react to that.
Yeah.
And they came out very good. Only a couple of boo birds in the crowd, but I thought they behaved very well, and they came off higher than expected. So I was very happy about that, being a Cleveland citizen. So.
Yeah, I don't know how much you probably didn't hear the beginning of the show, but I was like, I thought that I have no problem booing Hogan in person. I mean, I'm like, if that's how people feel, let him hear it. He's dead. His family and friends are watching. Some are on that stage. This is not a time to let him know you're disappointed in his opinions. It's a time to, I mean, if people did, I would have been against it, but I wouldn't have been out. Maybe I don't know. I'd have to experience it to know how I'd feel, but maybe I'd be outraged. I don't think outrage wouldn't be the word. I might be against it. But this isn't the night to try to settle the score with Hulk Hogan 24, a day after he died, with his friends standing there and his colleagues. But I also, Darren, I didn't think it was 10 minutes of loud Hogan chants either. It was some, polite Hogan chants. It didn't feel like the majority of the crowd, or at least not the vast majority, were doing it. Talk about the mood in the building. Were there Hogan chants before they went on the air? What did it come across? How did it come across to you in the building? Because on TV, it felt like polite chants that then tapered off pretty quickly.
It was polite chants at the very beginning in the crowd. Before they went live on air, you'd hear the typical Ric Flair "whoa" chants more. And
wow, yeah,
they really didn't start the Hogan chants until they went on the air, and it was I would say it was an average chant, good ovation, but nothing. But it wasn't the biggest pop of the night by far.
Yeah,
I thought for the situation, it was very subdued and correct.
Is Cleveland a town that, like, people talk about blue states and red states? It's not. It's just how many blue cities do you have in a state that otherwise has red rural areas? That's generally the accident of geography that leads to red and blue states. Is Cleveland pretty neutral or lean strongly. And again, people are driving from outside of Cleveland too for the show, but I bring that up only because Hogan dismissed the booze. It's like, I wouldn't bring this up otherwise, but Hogan said, "Oh, they booed me because it's liberal California," for the Netflix special. So he kind of discounted it instead of taking ownership for it. What is Cleveland's political makeup or the wrestling crowd, if you have any idea, Darren?
Yeah, Cleveland is in Cuyahoga County. It's probably 65 to 70% Democratic. And but they've always been a pro Hogan. I've been to the shows back in the 80s, early 90s with Hogan. He's always had the big pop. So
yeah,
but here in Northeast Ohio, it's definitely pro. It's definitely heavy Democrat. And you wouldn't have seen that tonight based on their reaction.
Yeah, although I mean, maybe I don't know. I mean, there might be some city where it's just been super loud Hogan chants because no one would have been mitigated by the racism in the MAGA. He went all full MAGA last year. I do think that affected people in light of what's going on and how people are still feeling about that as they watch, daily news headlines. Hogan has made himself voluntarily the face of that. And that might have mitigated some enthusiasm for him from fans who grew up and liked him and cheered him up until 10 years ago or last year.
It did. And he was in Northeast Ohio last year promoting his Real American Beer brand too, that got a lot of publicity and drew crowds at pro MAGA establishments here outside of Cleveland. So, but he was present here in the last year and a half here in Ohio with that promotion. And they have the freestyle wrestling event coming up here in the next week or two at the Wolstein Center too, that he was a part of as well. So he's still very active here in Cleveland. Yeah.
So Darren, just kind of open-ended, talk about what tonight's show was like. I'll ask, I said open-ended. I'll ask something specific tied to this. Did it seem like once the Hogan 10-bell salute and video package was over, that it was a completely normal night? It seems like people just shifted into, it's not like a wrestler in their prime died who wasn't controversial and there might be sort of a haze over things. Did it just feel like, oh, okay, we did that, now it's just on to what we originally bought tickets to see? Is that the vibe?
Yeah, it was. As soon as they brought out Logan Paul, instant heat, that got the show going. Yeah. And with him, talking the trash about Jelly Roll and had him coming out, which I'm very impressed with Jelly Roll with his microphone skills and how he handles himself in the ring. And that was some great heat right there. Standing up to Jelly Roll, and he brings up, your fluid neighborhood. I'll send you that body back to Westlake, the west side of Cleveland, in a really upper class neighborhood. I thought that was good, and it was going to set up with Drew coming out, and then Randy Orton coming out to even out. So I thought that was well played. And it definitely sets up their match at SummerSlam. Like you mentioned earlier, if this was a weaker card, I think you could definitely say that tag team match could be a main event for night one if it was a weaker card. So I thought they did that very well. Logan Paul got the opposite of what The Miz got later on in the show. We can talk about that later, which was really interesting. Miz playing the heel, but being in Cleveland, he got a big cheer. If that was probably in Chicago or Detroit, probably the other way around. He probably got booed out of the arena.
Yeah, go ahead and talk about that. Like, talk about the ebb and flow of Miz's reaction.
Yeah, I thought it was great. Every time he's in Cleveland, if he's heel or face, he gets a great reaction. Right. And how they set that up in the locker room backstage with sneaking up on Fatu and slapping him, picked his attention, like he's committing suicide by doing that. They just set it up right there. And then when they brought him out between the commercial break with his music and coming out to the ring, he got a big pop, and he was working the crowd like he usually does. He's a great performer working the crowd, no doubt about that. So I thought that segment, they started out very good setting it up, especially with Solo Sikoa and his crew coming out there to watch the match, and they're rooting, the Miz on against Jacob Fatu. So I think that continues the story for their match at SummerSlam.
Who got the biggest reactions of the night, and who was just, was it one or two or three people who were top tier in terms of babyface or biggest reactions?
Top tier by far is Cody Rhodes when he came out in that top of the second hour with his speech. Just the entrance that they did with the pyro, it it tops what they did back in the Attitude Era, and even up until 5 years ago. They really upped their game with the wrestler intros, and him coming out, doing the speech, talking about Hogan, and especially hitting the Cena match. I don't want this John Cena. I want the John Cena, the hustle, loyalty, respect. That's the guy I want to beat. And that's definitely the biggest pop of the night. Then I'd say probably after that, it would be Randy Orton and Jelly Roll was the second one. They had a nice pop, that first segment after Hogan.
Do you think the Fatu reaction was different because of the Miz situation?
Yes. Yeah.
Being from Cleveland, yeah.
Yeah, if that show was done in St. Louis, Chicago, Fatu would have been definitely more than he would be here in Cleveland. Just that Miz factor. Anytime Miz comes to Cleveland, he's going to get cheered. Doesn't matter, heel or face. Logan Paul, he coming from Cleveland, he is disliked by a lot of people. So it was no surprise of the heat he was getting here in Cleveland.
Is Cleveland the new Minneapolis where everyone's from Cleveland that wrestles now? Is that where we're going?
You got Johnny Gargano and The Miz and Dolph Ziggler.
Yeah.
So,
Darren, I have a question that I don't even know that I want to know the answer to, but I'm going to ask anyway. Did they sell Hogan merchandise tonight?
I didn't see any Hogan merchandise. The top two shirts they were promoting was the Cody Rhodes Cleveland Nightmare shirt, and also the Fatu shirt with the Cleveland Cavaliers logo on it. We can only purchase there on site. So I didn't see any Hulk Hogan merchandise. And I saw a lot of people with Hulk Hogan signs, a couple Hulk Hogan shirts, but no merchandise for sale.
On WWE Shop right now, you can find boxer briefs with Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant on them for sale. And a bunch of other T-shirts. They're calling it Hogan Legacy merchandise, and I read somewhere that they're saying they're donating it to his family. I don't know if his family needs money. I'd rather WWE and Hogan's family say it's all going to a charity, but I don't know enough about it to speak too firmly about it. But WWEshop.com, the top, it's big picture of Hogan going buy Hogan Legacy merch, but it would have been a nice gesture to talk his family into donating the proceeds to some particular charity that might send a message. But I didn't see that at WWE Shop, unfortunately. And I don't think Hogan was hurting for money or his family. So, yeah, but good to know they weren't just pimping it hard in the building tonight. Eric, anything else you want to ask about Darren's experience at the show?
I think that was about it. My biggest question was about the merchandise. Was there any Cena merchandise in Browns colors or whatever you're going for?
I didn't see any Cena merchandise in Browns colors. Didn't see too much could be fans wearing Cena merchandise. Just a mixture of Roman Reigns, Stone Cold, and the Hogan shirts. That's about it. Just a couple things to point out. It's interesting with the first show being there under TKO. My last show was the Holiday Tour in 2022 in December, headlined by Seth Rollins and Austin Theory, telling how far that's gone back.
Wow.
The configuration was different this time. They had set for a little bit under 9,500 folks. The three tiers of Rocket Arena, formerly Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. The third tier was 3/4 curtained off. First and second tiers were 3/4 open. And, compared to other shows previously, they have it set up right for 14,000 people. But for what they had, it was 9,500 sellout. Just a couple changes. It's nice being at a 2-hour show. The previous Raws I've been to, 3 hours, was just a long night taking your kids. I've been taking my kids for years. I took my oldest son tonight, who just graduated, so it's kind of easier, but it's nice for a 2-hour show. Another change is during when McMahon owned it, you see a lot of the video montages during breaks of past WrestleManias and other shows. You didn't see that tonight. You just see like the splash screen of SmackDown. on the scoreboard. They did do a video of highlighting the night 1 and 2 of WrestleMania and advertising Stephanie's talk show. So that was another thing that changed, with TKO. It seems like they're cutting down a lot of the money, between commercials, and I was really impressed with wrestler intros tonight, especially Fatu, Jacob Fatu, and also Andrade too, and the Wyatt Six. So it was really impressive in person.
Yeah, WrestleTix had them at 9202 distributed as of showtime. It was set up for 9,500, and it was down 3,000 from last February for Raw, which had 12,650 in attendance. So, that's a big percentage drop. I don't know if other factors are in play or ticket prices went up, but it's been a trend. There's a little anecdotal stuff that WWE has peaked, and there's more situations where you see crowds down and numbers down compared to when things a couple years ago were going up. Eric, you want to add to that?
Actually, I was just curious. Hey, Darren, were there any dark matches tonight?
They did have a dark match. They had a main event taping. They had from Fraxia, Nathan Frazier wrestled Johnny Gargano with Candice LeRae and Tommaso Ciampa. Johnny did win. He won pinfall after landing a springboard DDT. Pretty cool match. Hometown kid. And then they had 2 dark matches at the end, which we didn't stay for, but it was Gunther and AJ and Bailey versus Lyra Valkyria to close out the shows after we went off.
I think CJ needs to know if Bailey won or not.
Which is really interesting. Back in the 3-hour Raw days, they didn't have the dark matches. Afterwards, so
makes sense.
But I was telling my son, I was at the Raw back in 2001 with Nitro, March of the final Nitro, and the dark match after they went off the air was The Rock, Austin versus Kane and Undertaker. As a dark match after Raw went off the air. So those are the good old days.
Darren, anything else you want to add? Maybe reaction to Charlotte and Alexa, or I don't know. Yeah, anything else from your experience at the show tonight? Jade and Chelsea.
Yeah, that's thanks for bringing that up. Thanks for bringing that up. The Charlotte Alexa program. I from what I've seen, it seems like Charlotte is very uncomfortable being in this like support position. Having her come down there being like a cheerleader with the pom-poms didn't seem right. Especially to me, I think Charlotte's the most gifted ladies wrestler of all time in WWE. She needs to have something bigger than this, and I love Alexa Bliss. So somehow they can make that work. That'd be great. But I think right now, I think they need to do more for Charlotte if they want to make this succeed. The Jade Cargill, Chelsea Green. I love Chelsea Green, but it was a little interesting. They didn't advertise that match. Like you said, they just dragged her right outside. And I really don't think that does anything for SummerSlam. I still think they need to keep the strap on Tiffany and build that character. Once Tiffany has turned face, it's kind of her character's kind of cooled down a little bit. So they're in a little bit of a crossroads with that. So, but I thought they need to do something more with Charlotte.
Very good. Darren, thank you very much for calling in and sharing your experience at the show tonight. You'll remember this one. Yeah. I mean, just the Hogan thing for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Appreciate it, guys. Take care.
Thank you. Yep. As far as the Charlotte segment goes, Standard Deviation said it was counterproductive for Charlotte to say, if we win the titles, I'll be your friend. It's not likable. This started with a promise, and I think she'll end up cheered, but it could have been more.
I think I had a different take on it.
I did too. Yeah, Eric, go ahead.
I actually liked it a lot. I thought it was much less heavy-handed as last week. They didn't oversell it and make it ridiculous. To me, it played out like Charlotte is already wanting to be friends with her, but she doesn't want to admit it.
Yep.
And she really just went back there and genuinely was concerned about the broken nose or whatever happened with the bloody nose that they were fortunate happened.
Yeah.
And that Bliss decided to just smear all over her face instead of wiping it off.
Totally, yeah. Yep, classic.
Yeah, no, I thought she came back and seemed genuinely concerned and was about to say that they were friends, and Bliss caught her, and then she retreated from it. I thought it was actually pretty good.
Yeah, I think what we have is Charlotte has pride, legacy pride. And she doesn't want to admit that she's kind of softening and liking Alexa. She needs to be, dragged into it slowly, and that's what we had tonight. So, the acting was supposed to be, Charlotte said, Liz said, thanks for checking on me. And Charlotte said, or thanks for being cool about it. And Charlotte's like, well, why wouldn't I be? I mean, we're partners, aren't we? And there's like a little pause. And that's where Alexa says, you were going to say friends, weren't you? And that's why then Charlotte said, let's see if we win at SummerSlam. So, I mean, I just see it as Charlotte. It's leftover from who we've known Charlotte to be, that she is kind of surprised that she's softening and liking Alexa after being so resistant at the beginning to this. And I think it is more believable that she's taking it at this pace.
And now I think you're in agreement with me on this one, Wade, but I think the more intriguing story is that they don't win the championships at SummerSlam.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see what happens when they don't win. But I guess we'll see where it goes. But I've never cared more about Charlotte Flair as a character. I don't know. This has been the best image rehab that I've ever seen. So
I mean, and I think it was needed. And what I like about it is Charlotte seems more real and more comfortable in her skin on the show. And I think it's important for her psyche with everything she wrote about in the Players Tribune. It's not speaking out of school to bring it up. I mean, she's had a lot of personal stuff going on. Colleagues and friends of hers in WWE have been observing that for years, that there just seemed to be something, different that, when she was married on, especially like the marriage, just the marriage issue. It's like, there's something going on. It might be that she's not talking. Like, it just felt like there was a lot of stress, and now that's in her past. And she's written about it. She humanized herself. She opened herself up. She was vulnerable in a way that she never was. And I think seems like she's more comfortable now, having taken that big step to be open about her life. And they have a good partner in Alexa to take her this way. I didn't know what direction they were going with it, but I thought it was intriguing and good use of Charlotte to play off of that. The background that Alexa had, and have Alexa be someone who's trying to bring that out of Charlotte. It could have gone two directions. They might have had a leaning. They might have had a definitive course. They might have said, we can go multiple directions. Let's see how this goes. But I think they picked the right course, and I think they paced it, pretty well. I think Charlotte being resistant for however many weeks it was at the beginning makes what has happened since feel like it's Alexa breaking her down over time, which is more believable than just jumping right into it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's interesting. We've spent a lot of tonight talking about separating the character from the person. And in this case, her bringing more of herself into her character is working for her. And I don't know if it was last week or the week before when she was in a match and she really had the crowd behind her, and you could see that she was relishing in that. And I don't know that I've seen that from her in a long time. So I can't help but be happy for the person who's clearly just gone through a lot. And it's nice to see she's succeeding in what she's doing in her profession right now, if anything, to help her get through everything else.
I think fans will, not everybody, but I think they'll be like, okay, this seems like it genuinely is something that is important to Charlotte and means something to her. And that's going to cause a connection and a bond that was not there previously. So, yeah. Let's see. I know there's more chat comments I wanted to throw up here, but I don't know. Might be a good point to end too. Threw most of them on the screen along the way. So anyway, yeah, we'll wrap up there. Eric, thanks so much. People can check out your writing at PWTorch.com on Friday nights, and so I appreciate people who are visiting our website, PWTorch.com, and on Friday nights, you can see not only what I'm writing about SmackDown, but also Eric's comprehensive report with analysis also. So you can bounce back and forth between tabs on our site and get two perspectives on Friday nights. Mark, great show. Glad it went smoother than last time.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with you. I mean, the technical side, yes.
No, I got a crash course on how to try to entertain the chat room last time.
Oh, that was just wild. Fortunately, it doesn't. That has not happened again, and doesn't happen often. All right, PWTorch.com/GoVIP. Dive into our coverage of Hulk Hogan. We also have been running our 18 years ago shows that happen to be the month of the Chris Benoit family tragedy, and we've been getting a lot of people who've been experiencing that for the first time. Our coverage day to day of that. We're multiple weeks into our immersive coverage of what happened, what was revealed in real time, media coverage of it. So A lot of benefits with VIP membership. You can get full details at pwtorch.com/govip. Thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks to our on-site correspondent, our callers, and our chat, and our listeners. And until next time, Wade Keller signing off.